Rudy, are you similarly?
Hold on.
Oh,
Okay. Yeah. They can hear you, so you need to mute yourself.
Not sure that worked.
yeah. All right. So they're just working on.
Rudy Stewart, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay. Well,
That's
now I'm
good.
here. This is stiff. Can you hear the echo?
There's a bit of a delay, but it seems to be okay.
Okay. All right, 1 second. Testing. Rudy, can you still hear us?
Still hear it.
All right, good.
There we go. All right, so you've got Rudy on your phone. Perfect. Yep.
Yeah, Mary Ann says she can hear Linda.
Okay, good. Well, that's annoying.
Apologies.
We made it. So one of the skills that we prize is flexibility and adaptability. So you all get gold stars in that skill set. I just wanted to start with some good news, and this came in about 3 hours ago. There was an article in NPR today, and it was discussing the struggle of post-pandemic academic recovery here in the U.S. A joint project between Harvard University's Center for Education Policy and Research and Stanford University's Education Opportunity Project has been studying this. And so today or earlier this week, they released their education recovery scorecard. Wilton was included among the 100 or so districts nationwide that are performing above pre-pandemic levels. So Weston, Tolland, and Ellington are the only other Connecticut districts to make that list. So that's about as good as you can ask for. Good news.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Congratulations.
And so I know the last time I was at, thank you. I'm gonna have to speak really slowly, right? Because it's like a large auditorium. I'll do my best. The last time we were together in the fall when we were talking before you had set guidance, I kind of rattled off a list of accomplishments. So I won't walk you through that again. It's on our website. I think that what's important to know is that the money we're investing in this district produces many good products, and we just keep getting better. And so we're investing in sustaining excellence. I'll share with you one other that I just learned in the last 24 hours. This is also hot off the press. Some of you may be aware, each year, our middle school and high school students participate in the National PTA Reflections Contest. Actually, it's district-wide. It's not just the 2 schools. So this is a contest through which students produce artwork that's centered around a national theme, and then, you know, it's kind of judged, and there's a whole recognition system. Our high school senior, Sophia Pertola, had her entry, which was entitled, "What My Culture Means to Me," selected to be the theme for next year's contest. So very first time in Connecticut to have a high school student selected to be the theme winner. And her theme is going to be what thousands of students across the country, you know, write and submit art around next year. So that's another really notable, and congratulations to Sophia. So just to recap here, what are we doing with our budget? The budget's really intended to support our Board of Ed's primary goals to raise student achievement, to narrow the achievement gap, and then to strengthen our school community. And so we've categorized that as community wellness and belonging. You know, within that, we have more concrete goals: maintaining class sizes, maintaining the current mental health FTE, and then support the development of our social and emotional learning and trauma-informed instructional practices. Academically, professionally, we're focused on strengthening our instructional task design practices, trying to make teaching better. And then also supporting the continued development and implementation of our vision of a learner. So we used to call it Portrait of a Graduate, but those are all of the soft skills that we know kids need to have as they move beyond our high school setting here. In addition, we have money in the budget to fund our STEM initiatives and continued development of a range of rigorous academic opportunities. Each year, the high school staff get together and they present new courses and new course proposals to the Board of Ed. This year, we'll be running a new robotics course, so we'll have Robotics 1 and Robotics 2. Matt, you may remember what was the old shop class down here is now, it's a custodial storage space and has been for probably 25 years. That will be, at the end of the summer, our new robotics lab. And so the budget's funding that. We have money for the FTE as well. We have an advanced child development class. There is a new marching band class, and so you may have seen there's money in the budget also dedicated to supporting the marching band. And then we continue to expand our UConn early college experience offerings, and so we'll be offering French grammar and composition this fall. And then importantly, throughout the budget, there are dollars set aside to support the staff. And so the ongoing staff development we feed in a number of ways. In those years where we've really been constraining budgets, that's a line that's taken a hit year after year. And so you've seen growth in that line for the fiscal 26 budget. That's really key to our strategy of making sure that we sustain excellence. And then the last piece here is to support the facilities improvement plan. And so there's a few of us participated in months-long conversation with the TSNAP committee. And so the major facility renovation and repair work is going to be likely funded through a lot of those bonds. But we do have money in the budget to support ongoing kind of lower level facilities needs, painting, small level repairs. We have, I think, the big ticket item in the budget this year is to replace a gym divider at Middlebrook School. So things like that. Some other priorities tied to those goals. Responding to the enrollment change, we have new classroom FTE planned for both Millard Driscoll and Cider Mill. We're planning to restore the Director of Digital Learning position that was cut to 0.6 when Fran Compar retired at the end of last year. I already mentioned we've got funds for professional learning to support specifically the implementation of new reading, math, and science curriculum. And then we have had to absorb funds that were in grants. And so you may recall earlier this year, we lost all of our Title I grant funding. That was about $100,000. Those funds covered a part of a reading interventionist and part of an SRBI coordinator who coordinates the whole intervention program. And then here in the state of Connecticut, one of you asked a question, so I'll get into the details in a little bit, but our excess cost reimbursement. So these are the funds that are supposed to come back to us from the state of Connecticut to support our highest cost special education students. That fund at the state level was flat funded, cost across the state increased, and we got a smaller share back this year. We did last year. Last year we had to freeze the budget. This year we haven't had to freeze the budget yet, but there's a shortfall we have to make up for. And so we're anticipating next year we might be in a similar situation. And so we made some adjustments in the budget there. In terms of where the risks are in this budget, I see kind of three big categories. One are the potential unbudgeted facilities repairs. I'm really looking forward mostly to the break next week because it's a chance to clean the schools out and turn the heat down a little bit and disinfect. I'm terrified to leave because the last 2 years over the February break, we've had a pipe burst somewhere. So that's where we are. And so, unfortunately, usually it's cider mill. So we'll be extra vigilant, but we've got aging facilities. And so these things happen and we have to respond when they do. So that's a risk to the budget. The cost of outplaced students is another risk. And, you'll see in this budget proposal, there's really good news. Our out-of-district tuition is coming down by $500,000. And I think, and Andre can speak to that if you like, that represents the strength of those in-district programs, Genesis, as she named a minute ago, Community Steps, our collaborative centers here in our schools, our Flex program, our DPT skills program at Millbrook. So we're hanging on to more kids. And so that's really good news. But the kids that we're not able to serve in this district, the cost of tuition, the cost of transportation goes up 6, 8, 10% annually per child. And so interestingly, I was just on a statewide call today with superintendents and a professor from UConn who is acting on behalf of the State Department of Education and gathering information because the legislature is looking at some concept to try to impose tuition caps on some of these out-of-district programs. So on the bright side, the legislature is focused in on some of the exorbitant costs around special education. This is a risk because we have to serve our kids, whether it's here or someplace else. And when it's someplace else, it's usually really, really costly. And then the third area is just the ongoing reduction of state and federal funding. Excess cost is a big one for us. IDEA funding, we get about $1 million from the federal government. Again, that's tied into special education. There's a lot of question about, will those funds remain? And so we've got some uncertainties as we move into the next year that we have to be mindful of. And we don't have ever the obligation of not serving kids. And so if those funding streams dry up, we're going to have to respond locally. And so I consider that a risk as well. How about some good news? Right. So I think, and it's, when we talk about school budgets, we don't often talk about savings, right? We're the largest consumer of tax dollars here and as in any municipality. And I'm always proud of my team, but this year we've really gotten some traction in some important ways. I think the investments we've made in SPED over years, we're seeing really materially pay off in the budget, and it's really in that out-of-district line coming down so far. That's really monumental, and I think it speaks to the work that Andre and her team has done and the strength of those programs. So that number is a reduction of, it's $576,000 year over year that we're saving. So that's enormous. The relocation of Community Steps. So this is something I've talked quite a bit with the Board of Finance. I think I've shared it with you conceptually, but this Community Steps program, that's a program we run. It serves kids who are ages 18 to 22, who are, we continue to be obligated to serve. It's really a transition program, functional life skills, those kinds of things. Right now, they operate out of Comstock Community Center, and so they gather there and they do some vocational skills training, and then they go out and they have job sites in the community. We're going to relocate that program out of Comstock to a vacant retail space downtown. And so they'll be right in the community center, right next to the Painted Cookie. And so that'll be a permanent space. So the teachers will actually be able to move in. Right now at Comstock, they have to move their stuff in and out. We can expand the vocational training that we do with those kids because of the way the space is set up. And they'll be closer to their job sites because most of them have their job sites down there. So as a result, one of the vans that currently takes them all over town, we can take out of service. And so the van is just slightly more expensive annually than it is going to be to execute this lease. And so if you look at kind of simple escalation, I'm anticipating we'll probably pick up about $5,000 in savings next year, but that amount will grow over time. So it's a win-win all the way around, and the savings will continue to grow. The other one that's really important to us this year, as those in-district SPED programs have grown, so has the cost of in-district transportation, and that's not, we're not able to use STA, our bus company is just not outfitted to do the kind of, around town runs. So we've been relying on private transportation providers for several years. The annual cost increase of those vans is somewhere between 6 and 8%. And so we're at a point now where it makes financial sense to purchase our own van, hire our own driver, and we can actually absorb, I think, 3 of the runs that we're operating right now that cost about $950 a day. We can do it much cheaper. And so looking at this for next year, we'll save about $20,000. And so we're going to run this as a pilot for next year. I'm assuming it's going to go very well. And then we're going to look at possibly purchasing a second van next year, hiring a second driver, and extending our reach and probably providing transportation to students who are educated out of town, because those runs are also really ridiculously expensive. And then the other really great piece of news in all of this, as we've been studying the in-district transportation, we did go back to STA, our primary transportation provider, and worked out a system where the kids that are attending Genesis over at Trackside can now take our regular school buses instead of some of these private vans. So we started that just after the new year, and as it, we're saving about $1,000 a day in this year's budget. And so some of those savings we're going to turn around and purchase the van with. And so we've got the money already. And that'll fold, into neater savings next year. What else can I tell you? I think big picture here, when we talk about these in-district special ed programs, I think that the term that Andrea likes to use is cost avoidance. And so, just for a point of comparison, the average out of district tuition is about $120,000 plus transportation. And so figure, depending on, where the child's being transported to, can be anywhere from $50,000 to over $100,000. So, add that together and compare that to the programs that we're running in district. The average per pupil expenditure at Genesis is $36,000. The average per pupil expenditure for community steps is $51,000. And so, we're still spending money. It's more than our regular per pupil, which is just over $23,000. But it's a lot less than what we'd be spending if these kids were outplaced. And if we didn't have the community steps program, there are 14 kids in that program, they'd all be outplaced. I wanted to talk through some of your questions, but let me just shut up for a second before we do that. And comments, questions, feedback, reaction to anything I've shared with you so far?
I have one question. You talked about the risk related to the out
of district, yeah.
How big is that risk, and just trying to understand probability it'll become a reality?
Yeah, it's hard to say. So we often budget for 1 or 2 unknowns. The students that we know, and the placements we know, and then we're, I think, generally reasonably able to estimate for the kids that are in our system kind of how their trajectories are going to go. But sometimes things take a left turn. Sometimes, new families will move in, and that's a complete unknown. Sometimes we'll have a situation where a kid gets really sick, and so that's a complete unknown. So, I don't want to say it's enormous and it's nothing, but, it would be a couple kids that we didn't anticipate could cost us an extra $500,000.
I guess I'd just like to say, thanks for all the hard work. I mean, I know that you guys are making this look easy and seamless, and you had some good things kind of crack your way, but you guys came forth with your budget guidance or your budget proposal in terms of our guidance. And so we really commend all the hard work. I know there was a lot behind the scenes. I guess just more in the spirit of the question in terms of risk, right? I think you've highlighted, special education, but just generally, right? So you've had to make some trade-offs in terms of coming in at this guidance level. So just wanted to think, like, have you maybe comment on some of the things that you deprioritized, or maybe some other risks that you weren't able to highlight here?
Sure. So when the budgets are built at the cost centers and the school buildings, the principals often have, program enhancements, new programs, things they want to add or change. And more often than not, those will come in the form of additional FTE. And so we deferred a range of FTE. So just to give you a couple of examples, here at the high school in recent years, the administrators have been really struggling to manage all of their supervision and leadership responsibilities against some really intense student discipline situations. And so not that we have pervasive student discipline problems, but because of the way some laws are written, the investigative procedures are really lengthy. There's, a lot of due process things are really time intensive. So they've requested some additional support in the form of a dean. So this would be another administrator, that would really work on school climate and student discipline. That's one, we've looked at for a couple of years and just said, you know what, of all the things we have to do, we're setting this one aside. Cider Mill is also, really looking at its student body, and they've observed that really coming out of the pandemic, they've noticed an increase in kind of classroom type behavior where some kids have a really challenging time managing themselves and self-regulating in a typical classroom environment. And so they came forward with a proposal to hire an additional teacher to create another space that we could, kind of partially educate these kids in when they need to come out of the mainstream environment. So that one, we looked at very seriously. That's kind of at the top of my deferred list right now. And we just felt like the proposal needed to be a little more fully baked before we green-lighted it. So that's on the list. A couple of years ago, in responding to budget reductions, we reduced some paraprofessional support in some of our libraries. The middle school asked to add back some of that paraprofessional support at their library media center. That's one that we've deferred for the last 2 years as well. There was another request for a 0.3 paraprofessional that we set aside. And then moving beyond personnel, it's the materials, it's the goods. So, we have been starving our furniture replacement budgets for years, and we continue to do this year as well. Textbooks and workbooks we've restored. There are a couple of, you'll see, that's a change from recent years. I'm sure there's some others, but those are the big ones.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of what keeps you up at night, what risk keeps you up?
It's the facility. And, we've had some recent experience here with the fire that occurred, last June. So that we just got the cabinets installed this last week. So these things take a long time, and that was, completely out of our control, completely unanticipated. We've had a teacher out of his classroom the entire year. So, that's not optimal for kids, certainly not optimal for him. Over the February break, we had a pipe and a radiator break. We were on site, and so the guys got to it over the December break, the custodians were there, and so they got to it right away. It's those kinds of things. Had they not been in the building and able to shut the radiator off and, do what they needed to do, like, who knows what we would have come back to. If that happened late on a Saturday night or something, there could have been hundreds of gallons of water, across the entire wing of the school. That's the stuff that, we just don't have a contingency plan. We've got insurance, but we're babysitting the chiller at Cider Mill, and we're babysitting the chiller at Middlebrook right now. And so, the good news is the Middlebrook chiller has been bonded for replacement. That's being engineered as we speak, and hopefully will be in place by, next year, April. But we still have to get through this cooling season.
Kevin, the janitorial staff is kind of 24/7, right? In monitor mode?
While they're on site, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, while they're on site, they have to be. you know, and that's something Jose Figueroa, you know, works with that staff, you know, very carefully. And they know that, especially at Cider Mill, because of the experiences we've had in the last few years, they just have to be.
And times when we know weather's coming on a weekend, we'll make a decision in the cider mill building to keep somebody on, you know, through the night on the weekend. If something happens on a Saturday night, you don't want to not know about it until Monday morning.
Right. Other questions?
Just tying on that, I know we're going to talk about, I don't want to jump ahead, I know we're going to talk about maintenance. But on the facilities point, I think the Board of Selectmen operating capital, which was like 2.4 million, they had about $200,000 to $300,000 in there for Board of Education.
Right.
What is that specifically tied to?
So there's a list of projects that Frank and Jeff have generated, and some simple examples. Out here in front of the high school, the sidewalk is heaving, so that needs to be replaced. Similarly, up at Middlebrook School in the walkway, the sidewalk's heaving. So that money will go to replace the cement there. I don't have that list. There are other projects like that.
Yeah.
But that was, if you go back a couple of years, it was only in this last budget cycle that money was earmarked for Board of Ed capital projects. And I think that came out of a lot of conversation you were actually involved in. And so, they were able to achieve a bunch of things this year. And so the idea is, that's for some of those larger expenditures that we wouldn't carry necessarily in our maintenance budget.
Yeah. Okay. So you had coordinated on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. That's and then again, it's something that's been, a need for a long time.
Yep. Okay. Makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. You got it. So you guys had a bunch of really good, thoughtful questions. And so I didn't want to read through every single one of them. But I thought, some of them we've kind of talked around already, but I thought I would just highlight a couple and, you can weigh in. So one of the questions was around where, funding comes from if it's not local. And so I talked a little bit about that. We don't get a lot of state and federal funds. The, largest grants are the IDEA grant, which funds special ed, which I talked about. The other one is the excess cost reimbursement, which I talked about. Again, in the governor's budget, if you've been following, some of the conversation up in Hartford, the governor proposed increasing that budget in the second year of the biennium, which would be great, but we need it in the first year too. And in fact, this year, this is, the reimbursement is historically low, where for years it's been around 80%. We're sitting at below 60 right now. If that number doesn't move, I can guarantee across the state, sped costs are going to go up next year. So our reimbursement rate is going to be even smaller. So we're hoping that whatever budgets come forward and are finally reconciled between the Republicans and Democrats, there'll be money in the first year of the biennium. I mentioned to you already the Title I funding that we had was zeroed out. The only other, kind of meaningful tranche of funds that comes from the state is ECS. This is the cost sharing grant, and that goes right to the town. Again, years ago, that grant used to be north of $1 million. It's been cut substantially in the last 6 or 7 years. And so it'll be revised downward, slightly from in this year to, I want to say about $459,000. And so that's, goes into the town budget and it offsets, things like the nurse CSRO. There was a question about future residential development.
I'm sorry, just going
Yep,
back.
go ahead.
On that one.
Yep.
How solid? I'm guessing not solid, but like the IDEA grant is $934,718. Feels very specific. How baked are these numbers, or is there some risk here that they could be more or less?
The IDEA grant is solid. I think the worry would be that there is some change at the federal level where those funds dry up. I think I don't know how high that risk is, because I would imagine there would be lawsuits all over the country. IDEA is pretty sacrosanct, but I don't anticipate that, unless something really dramatic happens. I wouldn't anticipate seeing that fund change. We could see a lower excess cost reimbursement payment next year if nothing changes at the state.
Yep.
I would just say the IDEA grant. I think IDEA grant will still flow through. It may flow through differently. So the chatter out there is that it may become a block grant. sent to the state for the state to then distribute as it will. If that happens in the current climate of the state and they look at wealth, then it could be at risk for Wilton.
Yeah.
So I think the money will come. Question is whether or not the state will be given a much looser hand at how to utilize the funding than it currently does. So that's where I think the risk of IDEA is.
Yeah. Is that a fiscal year, so this current budget problem, or is that a future budget problem?
We receive IDEA funding currently every year, and we can roll over some to the next year. So it's meant to be spent in one year, but if you have a little left over, you can roll it into the next.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. So we will apply for the IDEA funding, as we always do, in late April, early May. So we'll see what the discussion is with, all federal funding being under scrutiny. There is some concern out in the field that there may be some changes to how it is distributed through the state.
That's for this one.
This year.
Yeah.
For this.
Big for this year.
Got it. So are there any other of these four kind of buckets, of the ECS, the ECR, the SEL, or any of those also block grant ask where it flows to the federal government? Or are they, if the presidential administration decides to somehow change it, we'd be impacted as well?
Just the IDEA. Yeah, the others are state grants.
And are there specific, I'm sorry, my role, are there specific costs that we're paying for through this IDEA grant such that it's got reduced? We're paying for a power, as an
Oh,
example.
yeah. Yeah, it's,
12 people.
yeah, that's right.
It's almost $1 million, so it covers a tremendous amount of the special ed budget and program.
Got it. Okay. And the costs that they're covered for, are they in this budget?
No,
So if this went away, it would flow into this budget.
correct.
Just like the Title I is in the budget, right? When we budgeted last year, we assumed that we were having the Title I money because we always had it. We didn't find out until September that we weren't getting it. The kids were already in session and the staff was already in place. We can't eliminate the programs. The students need the programs, so we had to absorb it this year. And then we added it into the budget for next year.
Yeah, these risks are like real risks impact this year, because even if, like to your point, if it comes a different panel, we still won't get it because of wealth distribution, things like that. So it's like
It's possible,
as you win,
right?
tails you lose kind of a thing, So this week.
It's possible. There's a lot of unknowns.
Keep rolling. What else you got?
Good for me on that topic.
All right. Good. So I picked some of these because they were, the conversation was broader than, just these boards. So there's a lot of questions about the new housing starts and, what does that mean for enrollment? So there was a question, future residential development, are the 37 students projected from 141 Danbury Road included in the 25-26 enrollment estimates? Hollyhock development's complete and could also add 3 or 4, probably not significant to the next year projection. So they are, I just copied for you the excerpt from the enrollment report. And so the numbers are baked in to and we use the median projections. They're there.
On that topic, and stop me if we're going to get to this later, I think it'd be helpful you to talk about how you think about development impacting the cost structure of the schools. So I think there's some concern in town that each new student adds $23,000. And it'd be helpful to kind of hear your thoughts.
Yeah,
on that.
that was actually the very next question. So,
No.
right. All right. Well, who are the financial analysts? We can talk about marginal costs, right? So I'll get you some markers and some chart paper and we can go through the whole thing. So simply, right? Each new student doesn't cost the per pupil, right? That's a number we back out of, we don't, drive into. And so when we hit a critical mass of students, right? So we get 20 new students at Fetter Mill, we're adding a class, right? So that's kind of how we think about that. And just the way that we structure our staffing, I would say this, the high school, because we staff to the sections, right? Teachers teach 5 or 6. And so groups of, depending on the course or the age, 17 to 25 kids. the high school is the most sensitive to enrollment change. And so we go up 20 kids, we can, you know, add a 0.2, or we can, you know, lose a 0.2 if we go in the reverse. Kind of next in line are Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill. And just as the, you know, kind of similar, we add a class, we remove a class. The middle school, because of the team structure, is probably of the 4 schools the least sensitive. And so we've got, you know, if we went down 20 kids in a grade level, they'd be distributed across 3 teams. And so that wouldn't necessarily mean we would reduce a teacher, because you can't take out a full 1.0 if you've got, you know, you're down 3 kids on the particular team. The next group of staffing, so our SPED teachers, our other related service providers, our PE music, they're kind of stepped out from enrollment. And so we look at groups of sections for them. And so in order to, you know, be in a position where we would add that was purely enrollment driven, we'd have to, you know, go up or decrease pretty substantially. If you look at, you know, if you go back in time and look at Cider Mill, you can see we made some changes there. You know, I'm just remembering we used to carry 3 art teachers, 3 PE teachers. I think we carried 3 primary music teachers, and then we dropped to 2 art teachers, which we still carry today. We just added a 3rd PE teacher this last year, and then music is slightly different. So, you know, we look at the enrollment, but there's a lot of nuance in the way that the kids come together and the way we section that really drives how we adjust staffing based on enrollment. And then the other area, you know, that's really kind of independent from enrollment is the program. So for robotics, for example, if we're going to add a robotics program, we need a robotics teacher. Make sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's also another way to look at it is if you have a couple that's selling their house and their children are no longer in the school district and they've been living in their house for 10 years and a new family buys that house and they have 3 kids that come to the schools and they move for September, it's not like all of a sudden we have like a $70,000 increase in our budget to cover those 3 kids that would move in. So it's not, so I think that, you know, it gets, people always have like a number, you know, for each kid, and that's where that per pupil comes from, but it's really a, you know, total cost of the entire system divided by how many kids. It's not, you know, it would take a lot for there to be 20 kids coming into the school all in one grade and
Right.
one, you know, that, and all of a sudden you need a new, you know, teacher in the elementary school or, you know, along those lines.
So that makes sense. I appreciate that. What do you consider to be the variable cost components of, and it's probably different, right? If there's 20 kids that come to school, you hire a new teacher. But if there's just 3 children coming in, like what new things does the school need to bring on?
Yeah. So, well, if we had 3 new 2nd graders walk in the door tomorrow, we would have to add, you know, whatever material. So, you know, we're piloting a new literacy program there. So they would need the consumables for that program. They would need the same for math, right? And additional things like that. Desks and chairs, furniture are already there. So there's really, you know, not much else. The teacher's already in place. You know, some classes are served by a paraprofessional. That person's already in place. If the child had, you know, really specific needs, you know, we don't have many kids who have this requirement, but some students that we serve require like a one-to-one paraprofessional. That's all driven through the IEP process. So that's, you know, a possibility, but not, it's not, you know, for every child.
Yeah.
Heat's on, lights are on, buses are running.
The low variable costs. Testing. So I guess then the next question is sort of, when you look at absorption levels, you know, how many kids can you absorb without increasing sort of fixed costs? And you look at that. Tell me how you look at that and tell me where that leads you.
So I did some, based on one of the questions one of you asked, I went back and looked at the enrollment projections. And so we're anticipating I think will answer your question, Tim. We're anticipating 42 classroom sections at Miller Driscoll next year. And so we're going to see, you know, kind of slight class size increases across those cohorts, but not enough to hire a teacher. So I'm anticipating for 27, 28, 28, 29, 29, 30 will carry about 42 sections. And so the average class size will range somewhere between, 18.2 and 20.7, right? So there's sway there. Similar story at Cider Mill. We're looking at adding 1, potentially 2, depending on how that 5th grade cohort shakes out when they actually all, finish registering in July. So we'll have 42 to 43 sections, depending. Casting forward, even though that school is going to grow in size, it's not going to grow to an extent where we're going to need to add another classroom teacher. I think here, when you hit 43 sections, that's when you start to put pressure on. So we might need a part-time art teacher because we're only carrying 2 right now. I think PE is probably good. So it really depends, but that's kind of how I look at it. I look at enrollment. The middle school, we're seeing a decline this year. We're going to grow. I mean, we have space in that school, so I don't see us needing to add additional staff there. And then the high school, over that time horizon, we're going to come down about 130 students. And so we'll have the opportunity to reduce FTE or to shift FTE. And then in that second 5-year horizon, we'll see growth. So, I look at kind of the big numbers are really the staff. In the supporting staff, except in the example I gave, I don't see that we're going to need to add anyplace else unless a program changes or, again, a kid has a particular need. And then just with the projections, the second 5-year horizon really shows pretty substantial growth when you look across the whole thing. And I would take a wait and see on that one. It's just too far out. The kids aren't born yet. So let's wait till, we see some birth rates and then we can better predict what we're going to need. With space, I think we've got the space because we used to run really large schools. We had our historic high 10 years ago.
It seems like, give or take at 22,000 is the average cost, 2023. Marginal cost maybe is like a couple of $1,000 at the most, right? Give or take.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not going to face any major budgetary impact unless like suddenly 30 kids suddenly show up above your projections for the next couple of years. If that event doesn't happen, you're not talking about like huge increases because the number of kids going.
I don't think the only other area that, we'll continue to scrutinize is bus. We took 2 buses out of service this year. We're going to run an analysis, later this winter and look at bus utilization again. But again, that's where, and that's, it's totally dependent on, where people live in town.
Right.
But that's another, and then, that's about $130,000.
Just thinking, looking back in my head. So if we were this enrollment in the schools down, call it 400 kids since I was in school 15, 20 years ago. If they were to come back, call 400 kids, that's about, if you assume 20 kids per class, it's about 20 new class sections. If you were to hire a teacher, that's like, what, $2 million? Is that rough justice if we were to go back to what we were 20 years ago, what the new cost would be? And I would get new bus routes as well.
I think it would depend also though how those kids are distributed throughout the system, because like the high school stats by section, so it's much more flexible. But you have an influx of younger kids, then you're more looking at discrete classrooms, and so then you get into section tipping or needing a whole new teacher.
But directionally speaking, and I asked a specific question. I actually didn't mean a specific question.
Yeah.
Roughly speaking, that's a 2% increase for 400 more kids, for 10% more kids. It's actually relatively less tied to that than one would think. Am I roughly thinking about it right, or order of magnitude, or do you expect it? You might need more cost from that.
Yeah, I'd want to think about that, and because I also think the world's completely different, right? And so if you look at where our budget growth has occurred, right? I think when you're talking kind of generic run-of-the-mill classroom, like that's pretty straightforward, but that's not really where our budget has grown. It's been in all of the special services, and so those are the areas that I think you add that many kids, then you have to consider what the special services impact is going to be, and so there's probably related costs, at least theoretically, special ed teachers, paraprofessionals, other related service providers, because some subset of that population is going to have beyond the typical needs.
Yep, understood.
You talked, anything else on enrollment? There was a question just about the contractual increases. And so our Certified Teachers of Wilton Education Association, their average salary increase is going to be around 4%. The Administrators Association, that contract will increase by about 3.15%. The custodians contract is going to increase by 2 3/4. And then the Secretary and Paraprofessional Union, that contract increases by 2.6 next year. And then we go into negotiation with 3 out of 4 of those unions. We settled with the administrators a couple of years ago.
We can follow up on this. I'm going to apologize. It's a specific question. Do you have a sense for what percent of the salary bar each of these 4 buckets?
Well, the teachers are far and away the largest, 55%. Yeah, don't quote me on that one. But yeah, and then the administrators would be the next, probably followed by the secretaries and paras.
And what are the collective bargaining agreements coming up? The 3 that are remaining? Are they coming up in the next year?
Oh, yeah. So we'll negotiate with the teachers beginning at the end of August, and then we'll roll right into the other 2. I think secretaries is next, and then custodians later in the winter, maybe in the spring.
And are they getting 3-year agreements, 5-year agreements?
These have generally been 3.
So that contract kicks in what, July of 26?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so one of you you'll have to talk about that. I think 1 or 2 of you participated in the last one. Stuart did, and
Was there?
I think Chris Drop was the other. There was another question about substitutes, and so you saw that line is growing pretty dramatically. And so it's not because we have more absenteeism than we did in the past. The cost of subs has grown, and that's a line that I think we've just underfunded. So if you go and look at actuals and then look at what we're projecting, it's more of a correction than an increase in sub use. There has been some significant changes in the way that subs are utilized. So a typical daily sub costs just about $100. When we have long-term absences and we can't find a good daily sub, sometimes, at least here at the high school, we'll offer a position to a retired teacher, and under the state law now, they can get paid at their former daily rate, so they cost a lot more than our typical subs.
It's the former daily rate from their last year of
Right.
employment.
So the long-term subs are more expensive now as a result.
Is there, this might be a macro question, but are other schools seeing something similar in terms of the need for substitute teachers? Is that like a post-COVID phenomenon, or is this just an anomaly with us?
No, I think, well, interestingly, so, the state website, EdSite, I've talked to you about, is just a wealth of information. They just, in the last few weeks, published, every school has a performance profile, and in that you can find the annual, absentee rate, and we have one of the lowest in the DERG we had for a couple of years. So we have, ours is 10 or 11, on average. Some districts carrying, north of 14. So the use has gone up around the country since the pandemic. There's been a major teacher shortage, which has also impacted that. And, we've got a smaller pool too. People don't want to substitute anymore. So that makes it challenging.
How many open positions do we have right now? How long does it take to fill them?
Say maybe two open certified positions. It really depends on the position. Positions that are in short areas are more difficult to fill because to fill them. And positions that open mid-year are more difficult to fill because most people have year, and those who would normally be looking are elected to be school district mid-year. So it really depends. We started the year fully staffed, and we have employees.
Thank
We
you.
have a few characters, one or two characters.
Thank you. Another question about, there was a line at the high school, pupil personnel, that was up 13%. That's just new employee, so new employee, different cost. Question about the 6.6% increase in employee benefits. That's really good news. I'll take that number any year. And so I don't know if Tony presented this last night. The town and the board used to be self-insured. We remain self-insured, and we've had great claims rates for years. A couple of years ago, we went out to bid, switched carriers. We had Anthem for probably 2 decades and switched to Cigna. And so we picked up some substantial savings in the administrative fees, but the plan's been running really well. And so we're looking at 6, and, if claim rates continue to be good through the spring, that might even come down a little bit. State partnership is like 13%. And, lots of other places are looking at, big time double-digit increases. So we're in a very good place there.
The town and the schools are on different.
Yeah. Yeah, and the town had an opportunity. It's something I look at it every single year. And, you'll see there are some communities, maybe Westport, I think Trumbull is another. They had run either self-insured or fully insured plans, savings opportunity with the state partnership plan. The state had been incentivizing school districts to get into the partnership plan because, comparatively speaking, our staffs are generally, younger and healthier than the state workforce on average. But you don't control the cost. And so, they kind of tell you in December what you're going to pay the next year. And then once you buy into it, you're in for 3 years. So a couple of districts around us have gambled. And so they've gone from, high deductible plans into the state partnership plan, which is actually a richer plan and employees generally love because it's not a high deductible plan. You're not paying anything out of pocket, and then back out again. And so I think Westport just made that change. They were self-insured, went on to the plan, and just came off the plan because the savings dried up and the cost increases were, far beyond what it would be to run a high deductible plan. So we've been in a pretty good place. We've got a decent reserve and our claims have been good. So I look at the state partnership numbers and, we'd have to see really substantial savings to even contemplate a change like that. And we never even get close when we do the analysis.
That's the town's looking at, I think it was like a 13% increase
Yeah.
on their healthcare. So this is better.
Yeah, I think the partnership plan was 12, and then if you're in Fairfield County, there's another 1% surcharge because the cost of healthcare down here is more expensive than it is in other parts of the state. So a couple other just kind of similar kinds of questions. Driver behind contracted services. At Middlebrook, we've added funding for some new student assemblies. So those are things that we've pared down on in the past. So we're trying to add back there. We have a requirement that if we have families who are non-English speakers, we have to provide language interpreters. And so for the first time, we're funding language interpreters across all of our schools. I'd mentioned to you that we're adding, turning the marching band into a class. And so there are a bunch of kind of uniform and other costs associated with marching band. We bought a new digital system that we're using called Panorama. We also have a subscription to ClearGov, which is a financial system. That's not up and running yet. The town bought it last year, and we had a license. And so we think once we can get it up and running, it's going to be really good. The reporting that comes out of it is fantastic. And so it'll really help, end users get a much clearer picture in a very simple way of what is actually in the budget. So we're going to carry that for a year. But those are the primary drivers of that line.
On ClearGov, I think Dawn had presented this to us. It was like a year ago or so. Any sense for when this would go live?
Well, I know I wanted it to be live months ago, but with the changeover to Munis, they're just not ready. So I don't have a timeline.
We are getting closer. We have uploaded most of the information history. I know Marianne was working on getting the current budget information into it. And then we need to spend some time really working with ClearGov on what reports we can get out of it. We haven't quite got to that point because we were still building it. But we're hoping over the next few months that we'll be able to start getting to a point where we can have some product that. Are you hopeful for next budget season?
Yeah, I was hoping.
Yeah,
this budget.
yeah.
It's a powerful tool.
I think so.
Yeah,
And I think,
the really good things that we think we can do with it, but we just need to have it.
no, and I think, I mean, you see the budget books, they're just, it's a page after page number. So having some detail and being able to represent that in ways that are, more easily digestible. I think ClearGov can deliver on that.
This is not necessarily a specific question here, but for these maybe contracted service, I misread what that term meant. I think in fact I did. What percent of the contracts we sign are multi-year contracts versus redone every year?
Our personnel, our labor contracts are multi-year. Most of our service contracts are annual.
How about our bus contract?
That's multi-year. Yeah, we just extended that contract by 5 years.
Thank you.
Someone had a question about, what's in the property services line. And so there's a long list of things that are included in that number. Repairs, improvements, leases, general maintenance agreements, vehicle repairs and maintenance agreements, equipment rentals. The increase is really a repair. And so that's the replacement gym partition. That's, I think, a $45,000 repair. And then there's another $8,000 slated to install gates at the bus loop at Miller Driscoll. And so combined, it's 53. I think that is.
Yeah, pass to another question.
Yeah, and then purchase services, that's out of district tuition, training, conferences, dues memberships, participation fees, and so on. There was a question about supplies and digital resources growing. The primary driver in our digital resource line this year is a new online platform that's going to serve both our new literacy program and our illustrative mathematics program. That's really costly. And so you can see the increase across every building. And then textbooks and workbooks are up, and those are the consumables for those two new programs as well.
Digital program is a licensing.
Yes.
Is it a multi-year license? Or is it do you have to renew it annual?
That's a good question. I think it's annual. I think most of them are annual.
Is it fair to say that as digital resources go up, physical textbooks go down, like one puts the other?
Not necessarily. And so for our mathematics program, there are consumables and there's an online program. I think maybe in the upper grades, Chuck, can you answer that question?
Depends.
Yeah.
It's not that clear cut. I think in general, over the past 10 years, we have textbooks, but there's still a need for textbooks. So one of the things you don't want, particularly with young kids, is to move to digital reading. The research is very clear that from a neurological standpoint, you need to be reading from books.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Some of these other things, these were kind of lower cost items. The SRBI coordinator I spoke about, that was a position that exists and was funded by the Title I grant. So we're covering a 0.3 there. The school climate coordinator, that was a jump. That was a position that was in the teacher's bargaining unit. The state changed the law, so beginning in July of 25, that has to be a certified administrator. And so we made the change actually in this year. And so the upside, that position went from a 10-month to a 12-month position. That person, got a couple of stipends. And so the salary increase is offset by the stipend decrease.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a question about defined contribution. So some of our longer serving non-certified employees, were in the defined benefit plan. And so as they've retired, new employees have come on, are in a defined contribution plan. And so that's why you're seeing an increase there. There's a small decline in the defined benefit line, and that'll continue to phase out as those folks retire. The sewer charge was up. We actually think that there might have been a journal entry error on the town side. If you go back and look at the actuals, that cost comes in two parts. There's the actual usage and then the fog test. So it looks like the actuals just captured the fog test. And so we think what we budgeted is actually the amount where we need to spend.
Yeah, we just verify with the town
You did. Okay.
what they were interested.
Talk about the other two questions. I think we answered the 47,230 account. That's all the repair and maintenance, and then the 52,000 was the gym divider and the gates. Last week, the board voted to we revised our full budget policy and line item transfer policy, and then within that, we created an opportunity to create an unexpended funds account. And so the board will have an opportunity this year, at the end of this year, if there's leftover funds, to direct money to that. And so that's, there's some statutory guidelines, like you can't deposit more than 2% of your annual budget. That would, be unlikely anyway. But it's an opportunity to,
How does withdrawing money from that account work? So is it a board action from the Board of Education, votes to use it, is a budget shortfall, whatever?
Yeah, so I likely, if we had a need, I would go to the board with a request and they would vote on it.
Yeah. And it sounds like there's expected to be savings from this current year, fiscal year 26.
I hope so, 25.
25. And then are there savings expected to be in fiscal year 26 that are baked in?
We did not bake in any, we generally don't.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, I would even think this year we're covering shortfalls right now. So, while we haven't frozen the budget.
And then it's just
We start
there's going to be.
Okay.
We talked about some of the savings that are in the budget, some of the bigger numbers we talked about already, but you'll also see savings on the telephone line. So Eric ran an audit this last summer and went through with a company and found a bunch of lines that were inactive, and so we took them out of service. So that generated about $30,000 in savings. Natural gas has come down. Part of that is usage. So following the pandemic, we were running our HVAC system at 100% fresh air. And so earlier this year, we were able to back off that. And so that's, made all the difference. And so we're seeing some savings there. Vehicle fuels down a little bit. I think that's just market. We talked about audit district tuition and then transportation. We're picking up savings in transportation with what we're doing within district. So that question 27 about, is there a downside to insourcing transportation? And the only, it's not our core business to transport kids. So, getting into the transport business is, I would consider a downside. It's another staff member, it's another asset we have to manage. So, the savings will be there for now, but again, that's, we weren't built to transport kids. That's not our core purpose. I got a question last night about the Open Choice program, and the question was, how's that program going and how many students are enrolled? The program is going great. So that's the opportunity through lottery where kids that reside in Norwalk can come if we have open seats. And so we brought in 5 kindergarten students this year. They seem to be doing very well. We have 3 in first grade and 1 in second grade, and the story is the same.
How do you determine the open seats? Like, just noticing the differences there?
Yeah, we looked at, we try to bring kids in almost exclusively in kindergarten. So this is only the second year that we've run this program. When we first started, we offered 4 seats in kindergarten and I think 1 or 2 seats in, 1 seat in first grade. And so we had 1 first grader come and 3 kindergartners come. And so it's really looking at enrollment and looking, at the class size average And so I'm anticipating, especially if we're adding a section in kindergarten, we'll probably have some seats available. But, we won't make that decision until mid-spring.
And how are the kids transported for that? Because they're typically out of district, right?
They are. So this is a kind of a state-sponsored program. So CES is the local RESC. They operate out of Trumbull. They're responsible for transporting kids. And so our only obligation really is to have the seats and to, provide our education.
And the state also reimburses.
Yes, $3,000 per student.
So there are like 8 kids on that program in aggregate.
9.
Yeah. 9 kids, right? And then every year you review how many you want to bring in.
Correct. And, the intent of the program is to, the way the state describes it, reduce isolation, whether it's ethnic isolation or economic isolation. And so, we made a decision locally that, if we really want these kids to participate fully, it's best to start them young and hope that they'll carry through their entire educational career, and that will, they'll have the best likelihood of having the best outcome. And so, my commitment is really only to, if we're going to, bring kids in, we'll only bring them into the kindergarten level.
And if it is every year 4 in kindergarten, that's already in your number of people is the case.
Yeah, we factored in. Yeah, and so for this coming school year, we will look at enrollment again, we'll look at registrations, and then we'll make a decision, if we think we have seats, how many we have. What else?
Any other questions? I would just say I don't think there's any other questions here, but from the Board of Finance perspective, I appreciate all the hard work. Sandy mentioned it before, but this is a lot of work that goes on, especially during the holidays, I think is when a lot of it happens. So very appreciative for that, very appreciative for the detailed overview and the questions as well. And also, I do want to say thank you on behalf of my board, the Board of Finance, to the Board of Education as well. There's been a lot of collaboration between our boards over the past few years. I think there was an intense effort to meet the Board of Finance guidance of 100%. I think without that guidance, that might not have been the number that was put forward, but I know that you respect the unanimous that we took. And I appreciate that. I know that was hard, so I do want to say thank you for that. And obviously we'll do our work. There was a lot of questions asked, and appreciate you being a good sport. Very impressed. You know the numbers off the top of your head, by the way, about all this stuff. It's pretty cool. But I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys too, for, working with us. And I think that we're able to get to this point because we had a good understanding about what, guidance is and what our respective goals and what we're looking to achieve as a school district and as a town in terms of what, fiscal discipline and responsibility to taxpayers as well. So I think that when we manage those expectations and have, solid conversations about them, and I'm hoping as we get like Clear Glove and other things, as we get better forecasting and better kind of understanding about where we are, then we can come to these table discussions in a way that we've been coming to in the last 2 years. So it's makes it so we're not sitting around and worrying about the little pieces, but able to really focus on the big picture.
I may need to come.
It's helpful to see that, understanding the risks and highlighting it ahead. That I thought that was very helpful because I don't know, it was that apparent like in the last cycle. Now we know what the risks look for because we are a town where 99% we are funded by the town. Most people, not even 99.9. We get a little bit from the government, I guess. Yeah. So I think important to kind of highlight those risks ahead of time. I'm sure people will appreciate that. And also, so the innovative programs, I just read that the business innovation.
Oh, we didn't think about that. That's not in the budget.
Really good because and took an effort to really get funding from private parties to do that with the Boucher family, the Strub family.
Yeah.
That's really great. So I feel like things like that,
Yeah, that's terrific.
Yeah.
it's amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, and we do look for that partnership and, like happy to have people at our long range planning, like really looking at, what our schools really do for our kids and for their future growth and development, and also what our schools do for our town, and the pride that we can feel as a town that what we're able to do for our kids and how we're able to send them forth out in the world. And, I run into parents all the time, and they grew up here and they come back, and, this is, a product that we should all really feel immense pride over.
And I'm going to sign you all up to be guest speakers.
Can I add thanks as well from the far away, and my apologies for not being there in person. But I just wanted to add a tremendous thank you, not maybe to add to Matt's and the others that have spoken already, not just on behalf of the board, but on behalf of the town. Getting to the 4%, understanding that presents some challenges for you. So thank you so much. And thanks to you, Kevin, Ruth, the entire board, the administrators, and the educators, not only just for helping us and helping our mission with respect to the town, but also the phenomenal results that you have exhibited in terms of educators and the results in the schools. It is just, there's nothing but good news coming out of the school system. So my sincere congratulations for all of that. And thank you so much for helping us out and getting to a budget goal.
Thanks, Stuart. All right.
We're through our agenda. You have.
We have public comment. Do you guys want to stay open for that?
Yeah, our
All
meeting
right.
can stay open for that.
Sounds good. So the next item on the Board of Finance agenda is public comment. So to make it easy, we'll start with people in the room, if people would like to speak, and then we'll go. I actually have no idea how to call on people. We'll figure out how to call on people on the computer, but we'll start with people in the room first.
I guess I'm the only in-person public commentator here. First of all, it's wonderful to see you all. I am here tonight because ordinarily I would come to your middle book presentation. I teach on Wednesday evenings this semester, so I can't get there. Therefore, I'm not going to enjoy your wonderful oversight, Ruth, which I really appreciate every year. What I do want to say, and particularly want to emphasize, is what Stuart mentioned a moment ago, and that, well, this is an extraordinary result, and seeing both your boards come together so effectively and so well to make this work is so heartening for all of us in this community. I want you to understand that, how much we appreciate it, and also that you know how much all the staff work that goes on around here, and we wish you all the best in retirement. All the staff work that goes on around here in the school board to make it happen, and that includes those of you present here. So all the principals and other administrators in each of the schools, of course, all the teachers, paraprofessionals, and the other professionals across this whole district. This is something we can be enormously proud of. And your ability to work together so effectively, both boards, Board of Finance, Board of Education, makes that work and is a tremendously powerful gift to the town. For that, I think.
Yeah. Would anybody else like to speak in the room? All right, so I will look to the screen, and if you would like to make a public comment, please raise your hand, and we will give you the chance to talk. I don't see anybody. All right, going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Hudspeth, for speaking, for your great comments. All right, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, moved. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Board of Finance is adjourned at, I think that says 8:28 on February 11th.
And Board of Education is adjourned at 8:28 as well.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Ruth, you beat the BOS by 2 hours.